But back now to the fallout from the Supreme Court ruling earlier today that cleared the way for same-sex marriage in all 50 states. It came down in a 5-4 decision, which split the court so sharply that Chief Justice John Roberts read his dissent from the bench for the first time ever. Joining us to explain what the ruling means and what it does not, Jonathan Turley, constitutional attorney and professor at the George Washington University Law School. Great to see you again tonight, Professor. So here's the first question. Does it mean, and by the way, it was the 4 liberals plus Justice Kennedy against the conservatives on the court, the 4 liberals and Kennedy won. So does this mean that churches are now going to have to perform same-sex weddings?
Well, that's part of the next chapter that has to be written. You know, part of the decision, which I thought was a bit interesting, is that Justice Kennedy didn't base this decision on the status of same-sex couples as homosexuals, but rather on this sort of right to dignity. He's mentioned this in a series of cases now, and that's what unleashed a lot of the criticism from his colleagues, saying, well, where is this right of dignity and intimacy that you're referring to? And that right's going to have to be defined a little more for us to know what happens when it comes into conflict with rights of free speech or free exercise. So you're saying it's possible? You're saying it's possible we could see legitimate cases or cases that aren't thrown out instantly against the clergy or the Catholic Church, somebody, for refusing to perform a same-sex wedding? No, I don't think that the clergy is really in any threat. I think the right of free exercise is going to be protected. Where you're going to see this conflict is more on the edges. Many of these religious institutions, particularly the Catholic Church, has an assortment of different types of services. And we've already seen conflicts on the edges on delivering those services, but then discriminating in the view of these couples in terms of their receipt of certain services.
So, for example, a Catholic university that allows married housing for heterosexual couples, but not for gays and lesbians who are married.
I think that's where you're going to see it, on the edges. And then you're going to see a very interesting conflict over things like bakeries and photographers. So far, the courts have been ruling against them and saying that they can be fined, they can be sanctioned for failing to offer their services to same-sex couples. And part of the confusion that's going to come out of this opinion is, once again, this somewhat ambiguous right, since it wasn't focused on their status. They didn't create a protected class around homosexuals as a group. That's going to make this a little more challenging as to know what gives when you have these types of conflicts.
Mm-hmm. And what about what about Justice Alito's comment that Shannon Bream was commenting on, that now, I want to find it here, but now that all those who believe that same-sex marriage is not okay, people who oppose it, believe in traditional marriage, will be run the risk of being treated as bigots by the government now. Is that where we are?
Well, I hope that's not where we are, and I don't expect it will be. This court remains very strong in its support for free speech. I'm hoping that'll remain. I was concerned today in the coverage, and I tried to make this point repeatedly, that the suggestion that these justices in dissent are bigots, or people that take this view are bigots, is really wrong-headed. I mean, you can actually support same-sex marriage and still believe that the Supreme Court should not play this role. I happen to agree with the decision, but I think there are good faith arguments, and some of them were in the dissent, that this is not the role of the court. Even justices like Ginsburg have said that she had qualms about Roe v. Wade, about the court making this decision for states when it came to abortion. The court as a whole has resisted leading the country in this sense. And so I really regret some of the overheated rhetoric that you've seen directed at the dissenting justices.
Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate. They're all good faith jurists up there trying to do their best, and they have different ideological prisms, it's true, but it is sad when you see them personally attacked so viciously, whether it's the conservatives or the liberals who get hit after these decisions. Great to see you, Professor. Always appreciate your thoughtful analysis.
Thanks, Megyn.